All right, I think what are we looking at here? Yeah, 3 minutes past. Let's get started. The others will join in as they come along. So thank you first, everyone, for joining us today. A couple of interesting topics that we're going to go through, and I'll cover the agenda in just a bit. First off, in terms of who we are, who am I? So Plan Dec is a SaaS platform that connects to a number of different development tools to help provide insights on your end-to-end delivery process. And so we're in a very unique position as having a global client base to be able to look across data and insights and many different types of conversations to help understand, how teams are coping, how they're handling this transition, and what they're doing both, in the data as well as outside the data to adapt to the new normal, as we call it. So we spend a lot of time with these conversations helping our clients not only think about which, the right metrics to choose, but how to roll these out, how to get them into the organization, and so on. A bit about me, my background. I've been with Plan Dec for about a year. We have a company been around for about 3 years now. And prior to that, my focus was principally on building scaled agile delivery capabilities and leading and delivering some large-scale digital transformation programs. So my background is very much from what our clients are doing today, the challenges that they have. And so I try to bring that, not only to our job, but also to the conversation today, what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to be thinking, trying to help guide things and offer a little bit of insights to hopefully make a difference in your organization. So hopefully today you walk away with, learning a couple of extra things, and let's get cracked on. So there's 2 main areas that we want to focus on. One, and I'll talk a little bit about this straight off the bat, is how has the new normal affected key delivery and engineering metrics? How has it affected teams generally? And where should you be looking in the data to help kind of validate some of the decisions and the health of the team and your delivery capabilities overall? And then we'll transition to some real life scenarios with Tom, who's a client of ours at Elsevier, who's generously offered his time to join us today, as well as giving you a little bit of insight into the world of Plan Dec itself. So we've got Ruben Sutton here who will join us, and he runs our engineering capability and our technology team at Plan Dec, and give you a sense of how we're using the metrics and how we're adapting as well. At the bottom of the, what you should see is the bottom of the screen, maybe it's at the top of the screen, a little Q&A button, and feel free at any point throughout today to post some questions. I'll try to incorporate those questions throughout our panel today, but ultimately we'll have a Q&A session at the end so that you can ask any other questions that you might. So just use that, drop it in there, ask any questions you'd like. And yeah, so I will get started today. So harnessing data and insights to deliver software successfully in the new normal world. So as I mentioned, we've got a pretty unique position working across a lot of different clients, different industries, different sectors, some very small, some massive. So we get a lot of different feels for how things are impacting teams, right? And throughout the conversations and looking at some of the numbers, I tried to pick 4 key themes, which I thought were really, really, really essential to helping teams not only adapt to the new normal, but ultimately to succeed in it, right? And I'll start off here. These are the 4, and they're not necessarily massively innovative, but they are great focal points for teams and organizations today. The first one is quite obvious. It's collaboration and communication, right? Now that we aren't physically in the same space, how do we maintain that closeness of collaboration and communication, especially since so many of our agile ceremonies are based off of the assumption that people are going to be relatively close to each other in the same physical space. The next one is delivery flow, right? So how are ideas and work being shared effectively across a team to ensure that teams can deliver efficiently, very quickly, minimize the amount of waste and waiting throughout that end-to-end delivery process. 3 is one that really is picking up speed anyways, and I think the new normal's only added additional spotlight to it, which is your engagement and your mental health, right? So how are your teams engaged? How are people engaged? What's the morale? What are people feeling? It's absolutely critical to not only bring in new talent, but also to retain your talent. And more importantly, especially as we're dealing with some of the dynamics of lockdown and some of the stress that creates, whether it's furloughed spouses or partners or potentially and hopefully not, people falling sick. What is people's mental health, right? Where are their heads at this point in time? Making sure that really sits at the top of your priorities around how do you engage and maintain your team. And lastly, and quite obviously, I think in some ways, is, what is the dependability of your delivery capability and the value that they're delivering, right? So we'll take a quick jump through each one of those 4 categories today, and we'll see what we can do. All right, first one in collaboration communication. So, as I mentioned, absolutely essential to having a successful agile delivery capability. Most of it's built on us physically being in the same space. And now that we can't do that, what does it require? Well, tools, quite essential, whether you're using Slack or Zoom or MS Teams, having digital tools, particularly with video enabled, to help you not only be able to communicate, but also maintain that bond and closeness of a team. Meetings, it's really essential these days to make sure that meetings are structured, make sure that the video is enabled so you get that real one-to-one personalized feel to it. You see a lot of clients who said, at first it was really interesting when we transitioned to it. It was great having all these tools, but how do we structure meetings to make sure we accomplish the right agendas was a challenge. Number 2, reviewing the ceremonies, right? Do we stick with the right ceremonies? Do we do stand-ups at the same time, at the right times? How do we do retros? And a number of the other ceremonies, the planning sessions that you might have, right? Going through each one of those ceremonies to make sure that you've got the right ones to support the new ways of working. And lastly, and I think really, really more importantly, and we've seen this a lot at Plan Dec on our engineering side, is frequent, quick one-to-one sessions, right? I have a question, let's just pop on a quick Zoom call or a quick Slack call or Teams or whatever it might be, and just do a bit of a face-to-face. It could be 2 minutes, could be 5 minutes, but having that dynamic ability to interact personally on a personal level with people is really, really important, right? So what are some of the metrics you should be looking at to kind of understand where your team is in terms of their collaboration and communication? One for me that is actually probably the most underrated metric that people use, or at least they use it in a way that is very specific to engineering quality, is first-time pass rate, right? A lot of people think about first-time pass rate as we've written the code correctly and therefore it passes. It's actually just scratching the surface of it, right? First-time pass rate shows you whether or not things from beginning to end of that process have been clearly agreed, have been clearly communicated, everyone's on the same page. It's a fantastic metric for that. And ultimately your cycle time, right? Whether it's for stories or tasks or however you want to measure it, making sure that that team is able to quickly pass things from the start of development to the point it's done and maintain or even improve is absolutely critical. And we've seen, in fact, surprisingly, across our client base, most teams have stayed the same, and even 30% of teams have actually improved their cycle time for stories since they went remote. So it seems like teams are really lapping up the new sort of remote working, the new normal, as they call it. The next section is on delivery flow, right? And this one's absolutely critical for Agile, right? Minimizing waste, ensuring that you've got good, strong handoff between people. And so having a way for you to ensure that your requirements are documented and broadly communicated, that people are engaged, quick handouts, and a tight feedback loop is all essential to that, right? And so having a tool that enables you to take a look at, right, how much time are our tickets spending in an active state versus an inactive state? What is the overall feel of that? And where are we most likely to find some major improvements, with certain changes, whether that's, hey, we have a bottleneck here in QA. We should take a look at that and understand, how do we bring the QA team up earlier to be involved or whatever it might be, okay? Third section is engagement and mental health. This is a big one, right? And a lot of this happens outside of any sort of tools. It's scheduling frequent one-to-ones. It's making sure that as a leader that you're being very transparent and providing regular updates on the business. Where are we heading? How are we tackling this lockdown? How are we tackling the rules around that? Where's our business headed? Making sure that people feel safe and secure in the jobs that they have, right? The other one that we've done a lot here at Plan Dec is every day we have a drop-in session, right? We put 30 minutes in our diaries where we just join up in a Slack room or in a Zoom room and have a chat, right? It's that sort of water cooler dynamic, that water cooler moment that this new way of working fundamentally lacks because you're not in the same physical space. So we create that through these drop-in sessions. We also run pub quizzes every week, right? Which people absolutely love, perhaps a little bit too much, as Ruben will probably attest to. And then running regular engagement surveys, right? So we poll our teams, and I think Ruben will probably touch on this a little bit later, regularly polling our teams to get a sense of how they're feeling. Are they feeling supported? Are they feeling engaged? Where is their mental health generally, right? And tracking that and understanding how that happens over time. Really, really, really fundamentally important that you have regular interactive touch points, especially if you can do something like we do in Plan Dec, which we have that integrated tightly into Slack. Just ask a couple questions, people respond, and away they go, right? There's no third-party website or anything like that. It's boom right there, right in one of the tools that they use every day. And then lastly, and really most critically, is dependability and delivered value, right? And this is really at the crux, is understanding, our teams reliably delivering what they've committed to and what's expected of them, right? Another question of, are we doing the right things is perhaps a slightly different question, but at least are we doing what we sought out to do? And what is that time to deliver that, right? Is that improving? Are we seeing things slow down? Are we seeing things speed up? And at what point in that process are we seeing it, right? So your lead time overall from the start of a story to the moment that story is delivered is absolutely essential to keep track on. And the last one really is one that we focus a lot on here personally within Plan Dec and a lot of our client base is the deployments to production, right? How frequently are we continuing to deploy to production? How do we continue to minimize the time in between deployments to ensure that not only are we minimizing risk in what's being deployed into production, but ultimately we can respond very quickly to any of our changing clients' priorities or business priorities to make sure that we have the right product at the right time in the market. And I think the more more clients are working on digital platforms and the more that people generally are transitioning to that, the more essential these are to us today. So just in summary, a quick one. So most of the successful teams we've talked to today are focused on those 4 key areas: collaboration and communication, delivery flow, engagement and mental health, dependability and delivered value. And really, if you were to take away a few things from today, some new metrics to look at or things to really dive into, our feeling is really that lead and cycle time are your North Star, right? They're absolutely critical for you. Flow efficiency is essential as well. The remaining bits in terms of deployment frequency, first time pass rate, engagement service, and sprint target completion, if you're using the majority of all 7 of those, you're going to have a very, very strong sense in terms of broadly, how is your team adapting? How is the delivery capability adapting to the new ways of working? And where potentially there might be opportunities for you to continue to improve. All right, that takes me to the end of this section. So I will go to the part which is definitely more interesting than me talking about slides, which is some real actual case study information with Reed Elsevier and Ruben from Plan Dec. So I will hand over to Tom and Ruben just to do a brief 30-second intro on themselves, and then we'll kick off with some questions.
I'll go first then. So I'm Tom McCurdy. I'm a senior business manager at Elsevier. I've been there for about 18 months or so now. I help a lot with the sort of data analysis and that type of stuff within the research, technology, engineering team.
Hi, I'm Ruben. I run the engineering team at Plan Dec. We have about 15 people at the moment, organized into 2 teams.
Great. Okay, thanks. So I guess let me kickstart this by a simple question, really, which is, in your organization, how has COVID-19, coronavirus, the changes that we've undergone over the last couple of months, how has that changed things? Not only in terms of the working dynamic, but what's being asked of you and what's being asked of your teams. Start with Tom.
So at Elsevier, we are the biggest publisher of STM content in the world. So from an organizational point of view, we obviously had a lot of research on coronaviruses and other linked viruses. So as a company, our initial response was to provide free access to over 20,000 research papers on these type of viruses and try to speed up the discovery of a vaccine or antibodies and all that type of stuff, which you've seen a lot of in the press. Mm-hmm. In terms of research technology, so we are a globally located team operating at somewhere between 8 and 10 different geographical locations, mm-hmm. predominantly with teams working in the office, maybe not full-time, but at least the majority of their time would be in the office. So along with all of the government guidelines for most countries that we've seen, we closed a lot of offices and asked teams to work from home, which, as you can imagine, has a bit of an impact on productivity and also adjusting to those ways of working. So what we saw initially in the first sort of 2 weeks was teams working alongside their product counterparts to review backlogs and also adjust the amount of capacity should individual circumstances require that. But on the whole, things have seemed to have gone pretty well so far.
And what I guess, Ruben, I'll ask you for the benefit. I'm aware of how it's impacted us, but from Plan Dec perspective, how have things changed with us?
So for Plan Dec, we've always been quite lean and delivery focused. So we've largely treated it as business as usual. We've been a little less hard on deadlines and targets and a lot more focused on ensuring that the team aren't working to a level that's unsustainable at home.
Right. Okay. So shifting a little bit to put a little bit more emphasis and focus on people as opposed to milestones.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And Tom, you mentioned in terms of that shifting dynamic, what sort of things are the senior execs asking of you these days? What has it changed in terms of what people above want to see, or kind of how is that?
So the senior execs have been really good, to be fair. They've been communicating. So we've had from the senior management team, the CEO and the team there, we have a weekly email communication talking about global responses, regional responses, and how teams are faring. In terms of data, we've been collecting data from a number of different sources. We've got obviously the aggregated team data from Plan Dec, but we then combine that with sort of engagement survey type information that we collect through a different tool, and then try to combine those two bits of information to start enabling us to see, are there pain points where teams are struggling to deliver and then working longer hours, or having issues accessing the technologies they need. And putting those two things together has really helped us. I mean, on top of that, obviously, we've seen huge increases in our Zoom utilization, with traffic increasing 4 times from what we were seeing at the start of the year, but also a 300% increase in people using video. So it does show the perceived importance of video now compared to what it was before, because obviously people aren't having that social interaction in the office.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we've also expanded, as you talked about earlier, sort of the mental health side of things. We've provided all employees with access to the Mind app, which they can download and help and also support their families. We have sort of at least 2 sessions a day, which everyone can join, as sort of like reflection sessions where people can all meet and chat and discuss the things that are going on. We've got a Slack group where people are sharing their sort of home setups and all these sorts of random things. We have like knitting groups and people will join and knit. So there's been a real diverse sort of response to some of the challenges people have been facing, but everyone seemed to have really adapted to it and got behind it. So it's been good.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. How about you, Rubes?
So in terms of mental health, what we've really been doing is I increased the frequency of my regular one-on-ones with my team, which has been very helpful. One of the things that we've also been trying to do is actually increase the amount of sort of check-ins and reporting. So actually me sort of touching base with most of my team every day to make sure that they're doing okay, even if it's only a 2-3 minute chat, and much longer if they need it. So obviously we've got some staff with loved ones who work in the NHS or who are very elderly, and so supporting those people has been something very important to me.
Fantastic. And Tom, I guess maybe given the nature of the webinar about data, I'd be amiss in not asking, from your perspective, in terms of where you were a few months ago to today, have the way you use data shifted? Has it changed? Are you starting to look at different types of information to validate? Is priority shift from maybe a sort of rigid number of things generally?
Yeah, we have seen a big shift in that. Obviously, we look at our engagement surveys and that type of information regularly, fortnightly at least, as a management team. But it's that combination and trying to analyze the engagement data as well as the delivery data to start to see those trends in, are we starting to see a drop off in cycle time or lead time for features, and also then sort of tied that in with bugs, because one of the things we identified fairly early on was that people not working together may increase the amount of bugs we're seeing in the code, because there isn't that ability to share ideas and communicate and peer-to-peer programming and all those type of initiatives that we run. that type of information has definitely become more of a priority for the management team.
Interesting. Okay, cool. And Rubes, how about you? Have you changed? I mean, I know that by hook or by crook, you've had to use Plan Dec either way. But as a user, right? As somebody who's now kind of shifting in terms of rather than managing a delivery problem, it's definitely managing more of a priority around people and pulling the team together and making sure that we stay as a cohesive unit. What's changed for you in terms of, are you looking at different data, or how do you look at it? What's different these days?
Absolutely, yeah. So, yeah, like you say, I'm probably Plan Dec's #1 user at the moment. But the way I've use it has actually shifted quite a lot. So, set of metrics which are sort of activity based, things like commits count, responses to work in particular states. So, for example, pull requests, raw ticket numbers being completed have all been a lot more of a focus for me. And also, I've been quite focused on those at the individual level in the hope that I'll spot sort of surfacing problems, because talking about mental health is pretty hard, and I've definitely got people in my team for who talking about the fact that they're struggling is a real challenge for them. And so actually having some data at my disposal to go, okay, well, he seems to be doing a lot less now than he was a month ago. I'm going to check in, especially have a longer chat, see if I can tease anything out and do anything to support them, which I've done a few times, and it's been very helpful in every case.
Is it? Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. Maybe one, just considering where we are with time and trying to bring in some Q&A as well, as you both look forward, right? And obviously, there have been some changes to the organization now. What do you think what kind of changes that have happened do you think are going to be temporary versus what are going to be more permanent fixtures? Or how is this going to shift things in terms of your delivery capability, the focus on priorities, the focus on people, the metrics you're looking at? Kind of how does it change things for you and for your team in a way that you think actually this is for the long run?
I mean, initially for us, a lot of people are questioning the need of the office and whether we could flip it to become more of a drop-in place rather than people having fixed desks, or using it as sort of a customer demonstration or sort of a lab type environment, as I say, rather than a conventional office. In terms of data, we have definitely seen an uptick in the use of the data available on Plan Dec, and I think that will continue just because it gives us the ability to monitor things without necessarily the overhead that's been there before. Obviously, we've got in the region of 90 teams. They're enabling us to see all that information in a single source, and then the power of drilling down into that and then combining it with the other metrics that we use really gives us a richer picture when it comes to how teams are performing and potential pain points.
And Rubes, how about you?
So we've decided to to become a remote first organization, which is a result of feedback from the team. So one of the particular areas is just how much happier not having to commute makes most of the team. And yeah, yeah. Myself included, it's really difficult. But people are obviously having to revisit a little about their home lives because not everyone has good space. So that's a problem we're going to start looking at, sort of ensuring that people aren't just working from the sofa or working from a kitchen table where you'll eventually end up with horrible back problems. As I know from experience, I spent the first month of lockdown working from an armchair and absolutely destroyed my back. In terms of data, I think the looking at individual data is something that I'm going to continue doing more of. I'm not, super interested in it. Well, I'm not really interested in it for performance management reasons, but actually to support the kind of pastoral care and that kind of management is been incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And maybe just a general question, because we've spent a lot of time talking to clients and also looking across our clients' data. And one of the things that we found really encouraging, right? And I'll ask you the question, Rubes, even though I'm kind of giving the answer, is we've seen an uptick. Probably 60% of the teams that we see across our clients are cracking on business as usual, right? They seem to have managed the transition quite well, and probably makes a lot of sense given the nature of a lot of development work really, is transferable to this type of an environment. Whereas probably, 30 to 40% of the teams out there have actually improved, right? And I know that played a big role in terms of the decisions we've made at Plan Dec around, becoming a remote first company. Tom, what have you seen? What's generally, how are people adapting? What have you seen the numbers?
We've had some interesting feedback. So some teams have said it's much better. The distractions aren't there. I can get on with what I need to do, and that's fine. We've had other teams and other people say, when are the offices opening? I need to get back in the office. It's too stressful working from home. I've got too many distractions. So we've seen both sides of it, but on the whole, people are keen to work from home more, which is good. And as you say, it helps with a lot of the sort of mental health aspects of not having to commute and the risks and the challenges that people face doing it. So yeah, I mean, it is definitely going to shift things, but because it's fairly early on and we still haven't really got clarity exactly when things are going to finish, we haven't made any concrete decisions such as remote first working on just yet.
Okay, fair enough. And Rubes?
Just before I answer, I'd be fascinated to know, Tom, because I know you're a lot more globally distributed than we are, but have you seen differences in responses based on different offices or whether teams are spread across a few locations?
Yeah, definitely. So we have, for example, offices in Oxford in the UK and also offices in London. So people's view of going back to the office in Oxford is a lot more lenient, and they're a lot keener to go back to the office just because of the way people travel in. So the majority of people in our Oxford office will drive in, so you're kind of self-isolated in the car. You're socially distant within the office and then can return home. But for the majority of people that are working in London, you don't have that flexibility when it comes to public transport. So as a result, we'll probably open our Oxford office up sooner than we would do our London office, just because the controls are in place to enable people to do that. But we've got offices in Denmark, in Aalborg. They have opened up and people are going into the office 1 or 2 days a week, and people seem quite favourable of doing that, not having to go in every day, but the office is open, they can go in and spend a bit of time, and they can have their stand-ups together in the same location if they need to, or they can have people Zoom in if they're not available. So, yeah, it's been really positive. People have really adapted to it quite quickly.
Good question. Good questions.
And so, I'm sorry, I've completely forgotten what your question was, Will. Can you remind me?
Yeah, no. The question is more just generally, forward-looking. How things with the in terms of forward-looking. How are you? I kind of answered the question in part for you when I asked it.
Yes.
How is it going to change things with plan, remote working, and what have you noticed more importantly in terms of the performance of the team, right?
Yeah.
Over the last few weeks, what has been strength, what's been weaknesses, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So our performance has been slightly improved through the whole period. I think March, so we went remote about a week into March, and that was our best month for delivery ever, which truly confounded my expectations. But a lot of that improvement has stuck around. In terms of challenges, so I think a lot of the team are very much looking forward to the schools and nurseries reopening, because adding a child or several children into the mix and having that level of distraction at home is a real challenge for some people. particularly where some of our engineers have partners who are key workers and have continued to have to go into the office, and so they've been trying to balance their working day around nap time, which is a very different adaptation. In terms of positives, yeah, it's been the communication's been up, the team seem very motivated still, and yeah, I think the team have found it quite a sort of pleasant period despite the chaos in terms of their working environment.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, brilliant. Well, that kind of takes me to the end of our questions. I did want to open it up for anybody who's joined us today to ask any questions they might want. You should be able to just click the little Q&A box at the top and open any. Looking a little bare at the moment. So if anybody has anything, just let us know. There are no open questions. Give that a couple secs. I guess maybe just a general question is how do you think your teams, your organizations are generally going to be better off in the long term having gone through this transition? Whatever that transition means for different office locations, different individuals, the experience of this, in what ways do you think you'll fundamentally benefit from having gone through all this?
At Elsevier, I think it will be a shift in the way people work, and not all teams, but some teams sort of viewed working from home as almost you having a day off. I think this has really shown that isn't the case. You're just working from a different location. You're still contactable. You're still doing all the work you normally would, and you're still available for any questions or clarity that you need. In terms of the business, the way our revenue comes in is fairly static. So most of our revenue for this year has already been billed in Elsevier. Obviously, Reed Group's slightly different, but I think the impact of this on our revenues will probably be found in future years. I think that's still to be seen. Yeah.
And for you, Rubes, what do you think?
I think one of the big benefits is that we've become a lot more transparent as an organisation. So our co-founders, in the lead up to Will's weekly pub quiz, have been doing a fairly no holds barred call for the entire company to get things off their chest, because there is a level of uncertainty, particularly just for general views on like what's going on. Is the company going to be okay? And actually having that honesty has been really helpful to people.
All right. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, fortunately. So Ross asked, Tom, Ruben, each of you, I'll let you answer. If you had to pick one metric, right, one metric to look at to get a sense just broadly of how teams are adapting to COVID-19 and the transitions it's making, what metric would you look at? What would be your number one?
The biggest one for us, which has surprised the management team, isn't actually in Plan Dec. It's in another tool we use. But it's we monitor our team's engagement score, and that's across 10 different metrics. And our engagement score is currently the highest it's been since we started measuring it. So we've seen some real big upticks in engagement across all teams. And coupled with that, we've seen big rises in our employee net promoter score, which we were surprised at and is really positive. But as of yet, that hasn't had a massive impact in sort of story points delivered and stuff like that. I think that will come a little bit further down the line once teams have really settled in and understand how to do their backlog and the amount of story points they can actually deliver. And as soon as they've gone through it, because it's only really been just 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, I think we've been kind of in this. So it's still been, the teams are definitely starting to settle down now and get into the operating rhythm of how it works. So.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. It's not a small uptick in NPS either. People are loving it.
Yeah, we were low negatives before, but I think we're up to sort of 20, 30 in NPS at the moment. So it's been And when you consider that's across 800 people, it's a real big shift. And those changes aren't just within research tech, you're seeing it at Elsevier wide level as well.
How about you, Rubes? What would you be focused on if you had to pick one to help demonstrate to you the overall health?
So, big one for me, I think you alluded to this earlier, is flow efficiency.
Mhm.
So, I think the number one risk of going remote first is that stuff starts to fall through the cracks and you don't have good communication happening. And flow efficiency actually shows that whether the team is sort of communicating enough to be able to rapidly respond.
Yeah, it shows ideally you should have minimal time in between if a team is, flowing quite well, handing things over, communicating, it just picks up one after the other and then it's in. Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Next question from Kirsten is, I think it's probably one based on what I talked about. We talked about reflection sessions. What are these? She's trying to implement those for her team. So there's a couple of things that we do. One was reflection or retro, which is just your sprint review, which is a common ceremony for most teams, and I think that kind of carries through. With any organization, whether you're not your Scrum or Kanban, you have some sort of a reflective session on that. What we've done more informally is every day we just put 30 minutes in our diaries. We block it out for in theory, what's supposed to be a no work type chat. And obviously people still talk about work, but it's more kind of a jovial a chat around it. And it's really for people to kind of join in and interact in a way which is outside the typical dynamic of a meeting with a particular agenda, particular focus, particular set of outcomes. Are we doing this? Who's doing this? Or whatever. It's more of just a general chat. And that really helps to bring it together. And I know I actually nicked the idea off of a mate of mine who does it, and he actually does morning and evening sessions, right? So they have a kind of a coffee break in the morning, and then a tea time, although I don't think he calls it that, but that some sort of equivalent 30 minutes in the afternoon, and that way people can usually drop into at least one, if not both of the sessions, and just have that calm interaction. And inevitably you talk about work stuff in that session anyways, but it's for that. And then also just, I think, planning events, whether it's a pub quiz or, I'll call Ruben out here, but Ruben used to like to theme our daily check-ins so that we had these little things where we would show up and it was like, top 5 things you'd bring to you from the when you couldn't get into the supermarket or when there was nothing on the supermarket. It was a sort of, if you could go only grab 5 things from the supermarket, what would it be? Those types of things, just, silly and nonsensical, but they keep a good kind of banter going with the team and keep things lighthearted and keep people kind of talking about more positive elements of life. And that's really helped. I guess, Tom, Ruben, I'll ask the question to you as well. Anything that you've done on your sides so, help the kind of cadence of teams and helping them gel, keeping them together, maybe outside of the common ceremony, Agile, like a retro and a stand-up, we all kind of know about those. But anything special you're doing?
The honest answer is everything you mentioned we do. So as a management team, we have a daily coffee break, as we call it, where we discuss predominantly COVID-related items that are affecting the teams, but then also expands into all sorts of random bits and bobs, and kids get involved at times, and you normally end up with lots of people waving at kids and trying to engage them in various conversations about dinosaurs or whatever. And then we also have a Friday quiz, which we did in the office anyway, but so a lot of people will join that, and even silly things. So we've had a couple of people leave during this time, and we've had virtual leaving drinks with sometimes 50 to 60 people all joining on, having a drink and a laugh and just chatting about anything really. So we have a structured sort of meditation session, which a lot of people attend as well. I personally haven't joined them, but they're in everyone's diary across the organisation. And there's one in the morning, one in the evening, which are run by someone internally that has trained in that type of skill. So, yeah.
Rubes, how about you? Anything? So I probably stole a bit of your thunder, but anything you throw in there in addition to what I mentioned?
No, you've pretty much covered it all.
All right, bro. So what are some of the questions in your engagement index? We do a daily, how are you feeling, 1 to 10 for everyone, but it's just one question. This is a great question. So we one of my favorite engagement surveys that I've seen. It's not even our engagement survey necessarily, although we've poached some questions for our own use out of it. But one of our clients has a brilliant one. One that we always point to really is God, if there were 7 great questions to ask an Agile team, those are pretty much them. One was, generally in terms of similar to what you're asking, how are you feeling, right? How motivated are you on a scale? Next one is, how do you feel supported, right? Do you feel that, people from above, people from below, they've got your back, right? Do you understand the purpose is another great one. I think we all recognize that purpose is a much bigger motivator for people than money. And so it's really essential to understand, do people understand the mission, what they're working on, what the point of this project is, do they buy into it, right? Because if that's ranking high, then there's a good chance you're going to have a pretty productive team. Do you feel that you can challenge people? Can you challenge people above you? Can you challenge people around you in a productive way, right? Or do you feel that, you've been quieted, you can't really voice your opinion, you can't really voice any dissent because of the dynamics of the business? That's one, I think, is another very good one. Rubes, you have a one that you run internally with a couple of specific questions. Anything to add on that?
Yeah, so we break the challenging down into a few categories. So challenging sort of, the sort of leadership that they're closer to. So myself and our head of product, our co-founders, and within their actual teams.
Okay.
Breaking them down has shown really interesting results for us. So we had at one point a team that wasn't gelling very well together, had some tension. This wasn't during COVID-19. It was in the middle of last year. But what happened, and actually having it broken down, well, they felt generally safe to challenge people, but within the team there were interpersonal conflicts.
Yeah.
Which you don't always see if you don't break it down. You have to be very specific in terms of
read the questions you're asking to get the answer. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think before I ask Tom this, I know Tom's got a brilliant engagement. The only things that I would add to Liz before that I think are timely and really important is you talked a little bit about making sure that when you're speaking to your teams, right, as a team lead or as a manager, as a program manager or above, making sure that you're constantly reiterating, where the business is, how they're tackling it. It's a huge stress, the unknown for people. And the more you communicate about this is what we're doing, this is what we think, this is the timelines, it doesn't have to be, 100%, but, vague news in some ways is better than no news when it comes to how companies are planning to address this, right? So I think asking a question around, are people clear? Do they feel that they're, that they understand, what the business position is and what the strategy is to get through the next 3 months, the next 6 months? That's quite important, because I think that's a big stressor for a lot of people, is uncertainty around what's happening at work. And we all have a role to help clarify that. I think the other one as well is which people are not going to typically offer up is, things outside of work, right? And I know Ruben has come across a couple of these recently. I'm sure we all have, where there are some insane stressors. My wife works in the NHS, and so that's been in the back of my mind, or in the front of my mind in some cases a lot of times. And I know, a lot of people that have family members that are key workers or NHS. And so those add a tremendous amount of stress, but it's not something that we as a global community, let alone I think one here in Britain, we openly offer out, kind of our what's happening at home and how that might be impacting us. So I think engagement in terms of trying to ask questions of people around, how are things going outside of work? Are they creating stress for you? Or, those are kind of ones that I would definitely ask as well. Tom, anything you want to throw into that? You guys have a brilliant engagement survey.
Yeah, we actually have a tool. It's provided to us by a company called OfficeWire. So we have 120 different questions that are cycled through everyone. And so you get random 10 questions from that block of 120, which you answer on a sliding scale. And it covers 10 main areas, which are relationship manager, ambassadorship, feedback, happiness, satisfaction, personal growth, recognition, relationship with peers, wellness, and alignment. And all of those aspects are then combined to give you an overall engagement score. So we've been using that for a long time. It's really powerful for us, and it enables us to see things almost real time. So you can really see the changes that start to take place. So really powerful for us.
One of those I think you mentioned, I think is really important as well today is do people feel like they're recognized for good work? You know, when they do a good job, do they feel like they're being recognized and appreciated by peers as well as people above them? I think is another big one I would throw into that list. I think that takes us through most of the Q&A, and we're pretty short on time now. So I guess to our panelists, Ruben and Tom, I wanted to say thank you very much for your time today. To everyone who dialed in, I do really appreciate it. I know that we all have busy days right now. I know this is middle of the day, so thank you for taking half hour, 45 minutes to spend with us. I guess on a parting note, if you have any questions or comments, or you'd like to get a sense of a little bit more of the insider data from your delivery organization, we'd love to hear from you. My good friend Dieter, who runs our sales team, joined us today. And he'll be following up with everybody today, just a quick email or call, just to follow up, see if you have any questions, any comments, any feedback on the session, if there's anything that we can do to help you. But yeah, so I will finish up there. Anything that anybody else wants to add as a final parting? No expectation, just no. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time today, and stay safe. Have a glorious, if you're in England, hope you get some time to enjoy the glorious weather today. And we'll speak soon.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.